similar things in your first meeting 2 weeks ago, that nothing is changing. Yet only a couple of days ago, an article in The Guardian said that British science is already seeing some loss of funding, because basically, why would the EU want to be committing to particularly long-term grants for projects that extend beyond 2 years, when Britain will not be in the EU potentially? So things actually are changing now. And this is one of the most important parts of the economy to South Cambridge and Cambridge City. And of course, is that coincidentally, half the people who actually do this work can't actually vote in the referendum because they're actually EU citizens, which is quite shocking in itself, considering how important that is to our economy. So things are changing. Yes?
They are, and I'm not saying for one moment they're not. What I'm saying is our position in terms of whether, the landscape in terms of whether we do or don't go for a second referendum, that isn't changing. The Prime Minister is very, very clear that won't happen. But that's why, as I say, I'm trying to push for local leaders here to come together to stabilise. Everybody has a role in stabilising their worlds. Everybody works with colleagues and they can say to them, no, it's going to be fine, don't go, hang on. But everybody has a contribution to play in that. But now we have a Prime Minister in place. The other thing to bear in mind is every hour feels like a week at the moment. And if things are happening, we're jumping on them and panicking. This will calm down. The financial markets have already started to recover a little. But people are going to panic. But that's where we need, as a local community, to work together and talk to our counterparts in other countries. Vicky Ford, one of our MEPs, is already talking behind the scenes in Brussels with the other European leaders and making sure that businesses talk to businesses, and other MEPs from other countries know how their businesses have relationships with ours in the UK. But we all have to do that. But of course there's going to be jumpiness. That's inevitable. As I say, it's a seismic shock. But we have to work together, politicians, businesses, academic communities, to reassure people. And for me, it's that people movement. And having some gesture that says people can stay, that's going to go a long way to kind of stabilising that mood, I think. Gentleman over the blue t-shirt.
Hi. Well, it's 22 days on, and I'm still in a state of shock as a Remain voter. But I'm with you that we need to move on, that it's a democratic decision, and that people should go forward with it for the good of the country. But I'm really keen to move on, but it's difficult to move on when it's a personal situation. My partner, who's lived in this country for 20 years and pays tax, she's from the Irish Republic. Her status is not clear, and I've heard what you said about the permanent residence card, but actually if you read it, it doesn't give you the same enduring rights that you had under the EU. And I think that we need to move forward, and I think I'm really glad that the Conservative Party have put in place the leader through a process in a kind of efficient way. I have to say it was rather entertaining as well.
I wasn't allowed to smile at any part. I thought perhaps just.
Well, I think just as an aside, I think Boomerang Boris. 13 days in the middle wilderness. It took Churchill over 10 years to get that. But I think that it's for me. I think it's now that Theresa May, who sort of seems very calm and collected, she needs to set a tone.
Yeah.
A tone for the negotiations going forward, a tone for the country, and it has to be one that is tender and tough. So what I would suggest that she does, and I want to see whether you agree with me, so I think she should do 3 things around this issue of residency. One, that the status and rights of the 2.9 million EU nationals and their families in the UK prior to the Brexit vote are with immediate effect, unequivocally and irrevocably upheld. They are here and it's totally agreed. And she just comes out and says it. Secondly, that there needs to be an equal and reciprocal agreement for the 1.3 million British citizens living across the European Union. And thirdly, she should say to her counterparts in Europe, or David Davis, or whoever's sent out to do the legwork, that without an equal and reciprocal agreement, Article 50 will not be invoked. It's quite simple. I think that would show that she has compassion, but she's also going to be tough in these negotiations. And we should get that out of the way before we get on to the real meat of the negotiations. So I wonder whether you would agree and promote that idea.
Yeah, listen to my speech that I made in the House, because that's kind of what I was saying, that we should set a tone right from the beginning that says, the people, the children in this messy divorce should be protected, and we should just get out there and say that their interests must be protected no matter what.
A binding statement. That's what she needs to do.
Yes.
say it.
I mean, to be
quite
fair, she's
clearly.
only been Prime Minister for like 36 hours, but yeah, agreed. And this has not been every hour.
Well,
feels
maybe
like
in the
a
next
week.
36 hours, once she's got all the ministerships all sorted, maybe she could do
Well, I am
that.
waiting for call.
Good luck.
But no, I think that's a valid point. Just on a technical thing, you mentioned in the residency form there are some things in there that aren't terribly clear or helpful. Could you get in touch with us and tell me
Yeah,
what
it's
the
not
flaws are?
about the form itself, it's just that if you read what it says, that is not enduring, it can be revoked. It's not, if you have a passport, it's very difficult, and a nationality, it's very difficult to revoke it. If you're a member of the EU, it's very difficult to revoke it. But that actual residency card, even though it says permanent, it can be revoked. And that's the point. It's not enduring. It doesn't give you the same rights that you had on the 23rd of June.
Well, if you can point me, if you wouldn't mind dropping me out. I've heard it's like a ridiculous 84-page form.
It's nearly 85 pages, but you know.
Yeah. If you could point me in the direction of the bits where it's vulnerable,
Yeah.
let me see if I can get those tightened up as a start of the term.
Okay.
But yes, I think you're right. I think setting the tone would
I'm
be
not sure
very
how
helpful.
2.9 million applications is going to get either. Enough people at the
Got
other.
loads of special service. Gentleman there with the pale blue shirt.
Before we move on from the first question, this may well have been dealt with in your dealings with the university in Cambridge, but I think it's very important that informed scientific opinion is well represented on the Brexit team. And a simple way of doing that is to have the Royal Society represented on the Brexit negotiating team. And sooner weighty, technically informed and politically sort of competent body that represents these important concerns in our constituency, the sooner that happens, the better.
I think that's an excellent idea, actually. I'm, again, sort of laugh a little bit about the Ministry of Appointments. I'm waiting to see whether George Freeman stays as the Minister for Life Sciences, because I tentatively said to George, we should have a cross-sector meeting. It's not actually just Cambridge City and South Cambs. There are scientific business, bioscience all over the country, principally Oxford, London and Cambridge, but some over to the Norwich side. But you're right. I wanted us to hold a round table of all those key voices together, but that I think is an excellent idea actually. Have you noted that down, please, Nancy? Thank you, because I'll put that to George, and if it's not George, whoever the new person is. Gentlemen there.
I'd just like to follow up on that. I think the point that the gentleman was making over here was that it doesn't matter what we think in the United Kingdom about bringing science together to provide a united front. The point is that our European partners are already dropping us off in grant applications. That's the point. They are fearful that their grants will not be funded with a British partner taking the lead, for example, by having a key role in the grant. Now that's a very important part of scientific funding in the United Kingdom, as you're well aware. But how are we going to persuade the scientists across the European Union that we are fit partners to represent their interests and help them get to the money? That's the point. I would add that in my laboratory, half of my staff are European Union members, a quarter of them are non-European foreign nationals. For the first time in my life, I'm ashamed to be British.
Many of us in this room have felt that at some stage over the last few weeks, and probably still do a little. I wonder, will there be any value, do you think? Because, I mean, at one level, we have to do this at a European level. As I mentioned, our MEP Vicky Ford, making sure that the scientific businesses there hook into ours, and we're having, almost despite the noise of the politics, the people that actually do the science are still talking to each other. But at a more local level, so that I'm busy getting meetings together of all the leaders of the organisations. Do you think there will be any value in me hosting something like this for EU citizens that are here? Yes.
And young people and students.
And students.
Further education college students, that's one thing that you and Daniel could host, given the number of 16 to 18-year-olds that come in from South Cambridgeshire to Cambridge. Cambridge Regional College, Hillsroad Sixth Form College, Long Road are three of the biggest, but also the smaller ones. You've got a lot of people, for example, from Sawston who come over to Netherhall. That's an example.
Okay, well, let's see if we can do something like that then. Because, it's almost, I want us to drown out the political noise, and this will be about people trusting people and saying it's going to be okay, actually. So if there's some value in doing that, let's do that. But I don't dismiss how, the fear that people have in scientific organisations. I do understand that. Okay, lady in the striped top.
Well, I think it would be useful to talk to the EU citizens around the area. However, I fail to see what that will achieve, since we don't have the vote and we actually don't have a voice. And coming back to the funding issue, it's what makes us panic, I think, is that the EU funding, and I think it's understandable, these are long-term projects. If we don't know what's going to happen and what the situation will be in 2 years, then there is no sense in giving a British lab a 5-year project. It's just logical. So what are the plans to replace internally this EU funding that we will inevitably lose in order to avoid a massive exodus of scientists from the country?
You're absolutely right. So it's funding not just for science but also agriculture as well. They've been heavily dependent on subsidies, and that's, prior to having a Prime Minister put in place, that's also I put on my list when I had my last meeting in Carpen 2 weeks ago, that was one of the things I wanted to seek clarification on. We've got the autumn statement coming, the new budget, and clearly the government will. There's a bit of volatility. We don't know how our economy is going to do, and we can't promise jam tomorrow, but we need to have something in place. And I think the first step actually is the fact that immediately Theresa May, and I was so pleased to hear her say it, was that we're not going to go for our budget surplus targets as worth. So we understand that we need to give our economy a little bit of rope. And ordinarily you wouldn't hear me saying something like that, but I think desperate times call for desperate measures. So maybe something in our autumn statement to give some financial certainty for science and for agriculture. So can you put that down on the list?
We've heard that Brexit is Brexit, which may well be the view of the Conservative Party in May, but I'm afraid I have to disagree with that on a number of counts which are important and related to what has been said over there.
Would you mind speaking up a little bit?
Firstly, as you know, there is a legal challenge which is being run by Mich Condé, and this will ideally force government to have a debate and to vote through a law if they're going to try to repeal the 1972 EU Act. And as you know, there was also Cardiff University and a number of other universities who signed an open letter stating that the referendum campaign was conducted in such a manner and with such little respect for the facts that its validity has to be questioned. Furthermore, as we know, it's only an advisory referendum. There is significant precedence in Europe for referendums being treated as such. I can think of at least 4 recently, including recently in Holland. And secondly, the last point is, so whoever is in charge of the government, whoever that may be in the foreseeable future, is faced with the logical impossibility of implementing falsehoods that were promised falsely during the campaign to leave. And we all know that freedom of movement is not an option, and the EU has made that very clear as a condition of having access to trade. So what deal anyone imagines is possible that doesn't involve freedom of movement, which apparently was the thing that everyone voted to leave on the basis of, or principally, shall we say, I really don't know. The last point is that Her Majesty's government has to act in the best interests of the people, and they're obliged to accept the advice of the referendum, but they have to then decide what is the best course of action. And I think that Article 50 is unfortunately a self-destruct button, because we already have the best deal we could possibly have.
But I'm afraid all of this is academic. But it is.
That's politics.
The Prime Minister has said Brexit is Brexit. No debate is going to force any change in legislation.
So a new government would.
Yeah, exactly.
But a general election isn't on the cards either.
How does a referendum how does a referendum supersede parliamentary democracy with elections every 5 years? We don't run a country by referendum, we don't go to war by referendum. So why should an advisor referendum set the tone for our country for a generation longer? Why can't we vote for a new government that says we will ditch Brexit because it's such a pig's breakfast of an issue, and actually decide, get voted in and actually decide we're not with Brexit, we're going to be part with Europe as we have been for our generation.
Or not, everybody's vote is equal, and if we start saying, just because we, the people in this room, don't like the result of the referendum, for me, democratically, that's an even slipperier slope, and not one we are going to go down. That's the elephant, it's in the room, that's where we are. A couple people applauding, wasn't even my husband, so who's got the volume fill there? That's it, gentleman at the back.
Yes, I don't like being lectured about what democracy is. And I don't like being told to shut up because of something. And I think the democratic responsibility that we have, us here, is to continue to campaign for what we think is in the best interests of this country, and that is Remain. And I don't think the campaign for Remain is finished, and it should continue, because it's our democratic right to be able to continue that campaign, and I think that campaign will continue. And there's lots of people here who, the gentleman over here, I think has got a very good case for how that campaign might continue. But we can't be shut up as citizens of this country. We can't be told that you can't campaign. The people who are campaigning for a referendum have been campaigning for that referendum for 40 years. I think we've got to just, our campaign is really just starting now. That's all I'm saying.
Gentleman in the pink shirt.
Yes, we keep using this phrase, Brexit means Brexit. But as Kenneth Clark said the other day in PMQs, no two people mean the same thing by Brexit. We voted to leave the EU. We did not vote to leave the single market. That wasn't on the ballot. And of course the Conservative Manifesto makes a clear commitment to the single market. Yes to the single market. That is still valid. Now, who knows what the outcome will be, but we have seen a certain difference of view between some of the new ministers. David Davis has set his face clearly against the single market, and yet we know that the things that people in this room have been talking about protecting depend on continued membership of the single market, not access to it. We can always secure access to it on various terms. What matters is that we remain members of it. And as you said yourself, the terms for that, the terms for the negotiation could change because people in the rest of Europe are taking a very different view. So I think what matters is that the Parliament now sets out clearly, of course we accept the results of the referendum. Whether or not we in this room do is not the point. But the question now is the terms on which we secure the best possible relationship with our EU friends and partners.
Absolutely, and that's why that delay before triggering Article 50 is absolutely vital, because it sets that, what are we aiming for? I agree with you. Gentleman just behind you there.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for giving this presentation for us. So, a little earlier on, you were speaking about the pragmatism, which we should probably go for now that the referendum has come. But I was wondering how pragmatic is it to execute the will of a very slight majority in the UK to basically cause what I think is going to be a meltdown of the UK as a whole. Let's sort of talk about applying pragmatism to the idealism of democracy when perhaps we should just be thinking about the pragmatism of democracy in the first place. The referendum to me seems to be very ill thought out. It's based on a simple majority. There was nothing about the unanimity of constituent states. So, for example, Scotland voted 62% to remain unanimously across the entire country, and now they're going to be forced to follow in England's footsteps. It seems to me that the interpretation, since it was so ill thought out, that the interpretation of this referendum is very much up for debate. Now, in Theresa's first message as Prime Minister, she was talking about how pro-union she is. Very pro-union of the UK, but not so much of the EU. So I was wondering, how exactly is she going to work on this one? After all, more Scottish people voted to stay in the EU than stay in the UK. It seems like if we were to trigger Article 50, we might actually cause the UK to break up as we know it, and I'm not sure I'm willing to risk that myself. It appears to be Yeah, it appears to be a very real risk that the UK might not exist in a few years' time. And my second point is that I'm also very concerned about workers' rights. So in order to remain competitive with the rest of the EU, we're probably going to have to very severely weaken our rights of workers to make business appear more attractive in the UK. And I basically think that leaving the EU is actually going to be sort of like, it's supposedly it's giving what the people want, but at the same time it's going to make all our lives very much worse, I believe.
And I'm not being natural born cynic, but I do actually feel on this occasion we have to look to what opportunities there might be for better. Who says in the negotiations we won't improve workers' rights in this country? Maybe there are things we've learned from the EU that we want to replicate in our own legislation. Who would have thought of that? Maybe we will. Just turning to your point specifically about the breakup of the union, Nicola Sturgeon, she's fabulous, so she is on it. She is a very, very competent, articulate politician. So of course on day one, she's going to look to get straight in there and bring her campaign of breaking it from the UK immediately to the forefront again. But again, something we've done a lot of research on, it would take an act of Parliament to give them a second referendum. So she might want it, but she's not going to get it.
What about democracy for them?
They've made a member of the UK Parliament.
Where's Scotland's right to self-determination? Like the UK's right to self-determination in the EU? Maybe the EU should have a vote about it.
Have a look on our website, there's quite a detailed section about why Scotland can't just break away.
Yes, thank you. Could I just push the point a bit that was made by the gentleman in the pink shirt, I think, which is this thing, okay, Theresa May said Brexit means Brexit, and you're comfortable with that. But, one of the extraordinary things, really, about the Leave campaign was the complete failure to specify what that meant, and that means we haven't voted for it. And the key dividing line, we can talk about Norway or Canada should become proxies, but is membership or not of the single market. But the way I'd like to push you would be to say, will you commit yourself to using whatever influence you have got within those discussions to push for a single market membership model as the negotiating posture?
Absolutely, 100%, absolutely. I'm a business person, so. Take that.
Will you also push for an immediate, in the autumn statement, an immediate grant, increase of grant, and a specified ring-fenced grant to science? Because that's the way that a lot of the concerns could be at least limited. Because here we depend upon this very, very much. If the autumn statement could specifically say that there was an increased ring-fenced grant for our scientific community for research purposes, given that they keep on saying the extent to which this area is the powerhouse.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, I think when I was chatting to this lady here, also agriculture as well, I think is another one that perhaps we don't think about as often, but that's our food on our tables. So yes, I think it's both. Anything that contributes significantly to our economy needs to be backfilled with money from HMRC, absolutely. And the autumn statement just filled the natural first occasion when that could happen. So yes, certainly. Gentleman with the green shirt.
I'd like to ask you a question about the democratic deficit. In the Euro 2014 election, UKIP got 4.4 million votes. At the referendum, Leave got 17.4 million votes. So who's representing these 13 million people? It's not the Conservative Party, it's not the Labour Party, it's not the Lib Dems, it's not Plaid Cymru, it's not... if they voted UKIP, that's in the 4.4 million. So there are 13 million people who voted who seem to me to have no representation at Westminster at all, unless you're now telling me that they're represented because their views are the same as the Conservative Party. Otherwise, they're not represented, and that's very unhealthy to have 40% of the people who voted in the referendum unrepresented at Westminster.
But that's a natural consequence, I think, of having a single ticket item on the ballot box. This way you're not voting for a manifesto, you're not voting for all the things that a particular party are offering. And that's why, for me, Theresa, of all the candidates, was going to be the best one, because she was the most neutral in the campaign, because we do need a leader now who can bring everybody together, because you're right, this has exposed divisions in our society. It's not as simple as are you red, yellow, blue or green, it really isn't. But I personally, I think she'd be the best person to try and bring people back together again. Need to know with spectacles.
Can I sit or do I have to stand?
Oh, it's very demanding, sorry.
I've got a few points. The Prime Minister, you said she was very neutral throughout the campaign, which I noticed. When there was to be no further contest over the summer, I agree with you, it would have been intolerable. However, for the 5 minutes that she spoke outside number 10, I didn't feel so bad. By the time that she had made some of the senior appointments in the cabinet, it's very Brexit. And I might be cynical, but I feel that to me it just feels that maybe we didn't really know how strong Remain she was. But like everybody here, whether they're in the scientific or research, agriculture, all of us, I'm finding it very difficult to understand how we can unpack this 40 plus years of cooperation and the way that we have become the European Union. Now, you say that it's a good thing that Article 50 won't be triggered immediately. So, of course, yet again, despite what people say in Brussels about wanting to get on with it, some less enthusiastic than others, but we are special because we don't have to conform. So while there's this sort of period where David Davis is gathering people around him, already the shakiness and nerves that there will be for research programs, both reciprocal, foreign direct investment, all of this will make it so at the point that Article 50 is pressed, you know, people are already going to have suffered a lot. And then we get into the post-Article 50, and all the 27 countries have to ratify our position. Now, if that doesn't happen within 2 years, as I understand it, we could just be left with nothing, as was said in The Economist a few weeks ago. Now, that seems to me extremely risky, and I feel heartsick to have this situation, because it's been a huge distraction. When do we, you know, refugees, all of that, that's not in the news. Many of the 13 million or 17, whatever you like, will have voted leave because of the anxiety of migration and the way that it was misrepresented. And it was fear of that, I think. I may be wrong, but I am very anxious for the future of my children, my grandchildren, and those who come afterwards. And like many, I would like it if the leave process would permit a second referendum, preferably through a general election. And you, as our representative, I would like it if you could champion that cause, because as you say, this region has a very special place in the economic, political and social elements of our country and the European Union, of which I'm proud still to be a member.
Thank you. I tried to jot down kind of the main points. First thing, just on this 2-year negotiation period, it's not that we would just drop off the end if we hadn't agreed. That is, of course, the worst case scenario. But all the other member states, if you're not quite there, they can agree to extend the period. And I would hope also that if we do, as I say, take our time before we start the ticking clock of 2 years, by at least getting our rough plans in place, then that means we won't run out of time. So that for me is why it's possibly a good idea, not forever, but for a few months to delay Article 50. The clock is not ticking yet.
No, but to people who are maybe coming into research programs or...
It is, but what I would say on that, two things. One, we are all very, very raw at the moment. Very raw. Things and human beings and situations do calm down. Things will stabilise. And, you know, for every research grant that somebody would apply for, surely in the normal course of things, irrelevant of Brexit, we don't always get them. And funding doesn't always come. So, you know, I think the risk of us panicking, yeah, I do genuinely believe things will calm down. Just on some of the other points you mentioned, quite a strong Brexit cabinet. Well, yes, on the David Davis team, it's set up to negotiate out. Well, yes, and I think it's right that you would expect that. What I see in Theresa May, I don't know her terribly well, she's a shy woman. She is a public servant to the core. She is as close to a civil servant as you will get in a politician. And she believes that the mandate of the British public want her to come out. She will exercise that with every will in her being. And that's why, if you're going to do a deal, you want the people who really believe in that deal to do it. So I think it's probably inevitable that a lot of the Brexit side of the cabinet would be from people with that view. You mentioned other things dropping off the radar, like refugees, absolutely. And funny enough, Nat and I were only chatting about that this week. I'm going to try and get back out to the refugee camps over the summer because I absolutely don't want it to drop off the radar. And one thing that makes me, just the penny drop with me the other day, Dublin 3, the whole European legislation on which we could repatriate children, families with members in the UK already, did that go out the window? My heart sank when I thought that, so I'm going to make absolutely certain that refugees don't drop off the radar. That you've got a word on. And yet, one of the points I noted that you mentioned around, you thought that a lot of people who voted leave were scared of migration coming to them. Actually, I'm not sure if that's the case. I think there was an element of that, but for me, it was more of a two big things to bureaucracy and politicians, actually. It was the biggest message they could possibly. It's dangerous, but I think it had a lot to do with that. Okay, gentleman's jacket there.
There's obviously still a lot of legitimate concern and emotion and anguish over all of this, but I think that in no small part has been caused by the fact that we've been led to believe by the media and by many politicians, I'm not looking at you, Heidi, that there is no plan. And actually that's incorrect. There is a plan. There has been a plan for quite some time. It's a very detailed plan. It's based on real facts, on real knowledge of how the EU works, how the UK works, and all of that. The full version of the plan is about 400 pages long. It can be downloaded from a website. You can all read it, and I would actually suggest that everyone reads it. I would certainly suggest that you read it, and that if you believe that this plan has merit, that you bring it to the attention of as many people as you can in Westminster, because it's very constructive, I think.
Can you tell us who you are?
You're not talking about this Brexit thing.
It's not my plan. I just came across it. I'm not the author, I haven't contributed to it. You may already know which plan it is, and you may know that the author actually gave evidence to the Treasury Committee on Wednesday. So Andrew Tearing and his colleague know about it. I dropped you a quick email last week about it. And before I tell you which plan it is and where you can get it, 2 health warnings. It was written by a committed leaver, but please get past that and read the plan and judge it on its merits. And secondly, the person who wrote it is a man of very strong convictions and strong opinions, and can be quite undiplomatic in the way he talks about politicians and other people. Please get past that as well. Read the plan, read the blog, and make your own decision about whether this has merit. I think there's a lot of useful information in there, a lot of useful guidance on how we can actually move forward towards the best possible outcome. The plan, yes, it is Flexit. F-L-E-X-C-I-T, you can Google it. The website is www.eureferendum.com. You can download it there, you can look at the blog. I have no axe to grind, I have no ulterior motive in telling you this. Just that I came across it, I read it, I thought, actually, this makes a lot of sense, it's a good resource.
So cunning plan then.
And you know that they are, as a civil service team, they are gathering a huge team now together to update this community industry work. How is it about 20 hours ago? Gentleman at the back with the burgundy t-shirt.
Right, yeah, thank you. You said a moment ago that things will calm down, and also you referred in your opening remarks to some of the nastiness that we've seen in the campaign as well. I think most people would agree that this is at least in part the unhealed wounds from the 2007-2008 banking crisis and the aftermath. And my concern is that with Brexit coming, we'll have potentially another period of turmoil in which these wounds will open even further rather than being closed. And I'm kind of worried about what that will lead to in our political life as well, if the evidence of what's happened up till now is anything to go by. So in a way it's heartwarming to hear this one nation sentiments from Theresa May, and of course it's well known where you personally stand in all of this. But I have to say we've heard much of this before, and so my question is, with a kind of a slim majority in the House of Commons, and maybe not a large number of people in the Tory party perhaps not sharing the sentiments that Theresa May gave and that you have shown as well in your maiden speech, can this government really deliver on all this? I think a prerequisite for things to calm down is for some of these wounds to be healed, for people not to feel that they're just being left behind yet again, while a certain section of society floats free and does rather well out of the whole thing.
And that is one of the most important things and challenges, because our world has to go on, and there are rifts to repair, and there are so many disenfranchised people in this country. We are so lucky in this part of the world. We are in a wonderful bubble, really we are. Where I'm from originally, 3 miles from Barnsley in South Yorkshire, I tell you it is a different world, and we don't know how lucky we are, and we have got to reach out to those people. Yes, you're right, you can be cynical, you can think politicians well, and I, for one, am gathering a bunch of merry, fellow-minded Conservative MPs. I think the smell of potential promotion will be enough for other more traditional MPs to follow Theresa's lead. It's amazing what the smell of power does for people to change their behaviour. But we have to change. And I think actually in the 2015 intake that came in with me, we've got a couple of teachers, we've got a postman, we've got such a range of proper normal people, not career politicians, that I do think if ever there was a time for it to change and for us to start looking after every member of society, then it's now. I'm actually quite excited about that. Okay, there's a lady there.
Hi, just a couple of points. I used to work in research within the European partners, and although obviously the funding is a massive part of doing that work, so is the cooperation. If the government does manage to provide the same amount of funding that they would have got from the EU, losing all that cooperation and losing all those networks that have taken years and years to build up, just to be destroyed like this will have such a damage on the research that we do, and such a damage on our credibility as a country that is forward in scientific research. I think just to say we'll just go for the funds, I think that's really irresponsible, because it's so much more than just funding. So the second point I want to make is that I am, well, I don't know what the appropriate term for you to say, but I'm the daughter of an Italian citizen who came here before we joined the EU, and I've already heard comments about racist comments and people saying to go home. It's not nice and it's not welcoming. Where do people like me go? I don't actually have a home here anymore in my life. I'll stay. Thank you. Out of the country that I've grown up in and loved. And I have cousins abroad. It's just so heartbreaking that we're in this position and that we're having to fight for something that's going to be torn away from us, that's made so much. And the last thing I'd like to say is, if we can't have a second referendum for whatever reasons are thrown out, I really would strongly support another general election so that we've got a chance to...
Just to put myself a little in your shoes, my mum's German, so I know a little of how you're feeling. However, my German mother, I'd like to see anybody tell her to go home. My father's been trying for years. But you must feel welcome. If any of us hear even a sniff of these comments, we shout them down. Not in my constituency. Utterly unacceptable.
Not in our country.
No, but I can't be everywhere. It's quite a stretch of Packard down here, so I can't go around everywhere. Gentleman here with the dark jacket on.
Yes, I just want to, going back to the Brexit is Brexit thing,
I don't think it's right that the result of the referendum, clearly that is the will of the people as spoken now, and we shouldn't dismiss that. But what it isn't is a vote for carte blanche to leave Europe under any terms. It was a vote made with a huge range of promises for £350 million a week, for we can have immigration controls and access to a free market. It was a vote for those terms. It wasn't a vote to just leave Europe regardless of what we can get. And I mean, the most important thing, and the reason that I think it's very good that we ended up with Theresa May and not, say, Andrea Leadsom, is that Article 50 is a real trap here, because when Article 50 is declared, at that point we leave on whatever terms. 2 years down the line, in all probability, there won't be a majority for Brexit anymore. When people realise there isn't the money, you can't have the immigration controls and the free market. And, as you said, it wasn't really just a vote against the EU. It was a vote against the insensitive bureaucracy of government that we're just as guilty of in this country, really, as we are in Europe. The regulation that we have to deal with at work, I know it's hardly any of this is EU regulation. There's just as much bureaucracy nationally. And what I'm really worried about is that we'll go steam forth, sign Article 50, and then we will end up leaving without, actually against the will of the people. We'll be in a situation that we're actually leaving, although the country no longer wants to. But the thing I think that might turn that into a self-fulfilling prophecy is the way that after 52 to 48% vote in favour of leaving, that 48% of people, a majority of people around here, a majority of people of under 50, majorities in London, the representation of that voice has almost vanished in the House of Commons now. There is a consensus that Brexit is Brexit. If that debate as to whether that is the right thing to happen doesn't take place now, we just blindly, this will happen, and it will be a terrible thing for the country. But we do need that argument does still need to be voiced in the House of Commons. Never before any vote, no other vote that we ever have in this country, does the opposition side then just sit down and say, okay, we lost the general election, well, we'll sit down and be quiet for 4 years. That doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen here either. I'm not saying we should have another referendum now. I mean, I'm fairly inoculated against referendums. A general election, quite frankly, is a waste of time because this isn't an issue that currently divides along party lines. But the debate we've got a representative democracy, and that debate should still be occurring in the House of Commons. We shouldn't I don't want to see all our politicians just kowtowing to this new orthodoxy that we're leaving. That's unjustified.
I suppose that the two things I'd put back to you on that point is, one, well, if every MP represented their constituents in the House of Commons, then they would still say vote out. Because that is the majority will.
But 200 or
so if it's not
is a good debate.
The debate will happen, I'm certain the debate will happen.
It's already scheduled.
Of it. But what I'm saying is if MPs are true to what we're saying in the purest form, that they should represent their constituents, then the vote will still be out. But the second thing is just referring to what I said in my opening few lines, that do I want my voice to be the argumentative one being a pain inside a government, or do I want my voice, how is my voice most usefully used? Is it batting for us in our scientific communities and our EU citizens to stay here? Or is it me being pushed onto the naughty step again, because yet again I'm being a pain for the government? I've got to pick my times. And I think my voice is more powerful if it's joining up with London, joining up with Oxford and battling for what we need. Gentleman in the striped top at the back.
We've talked a bit about disenfranchisement, and the gentleman over here, I feel quite lucky that I live in an area which is quite enlightened. But across the country, millions of young people have just been ignored, pretty much. That's how I see it. And so, really, what are you going to do for kind of young disenfranchised voters who, frankly, why should they bother voting? They're just going to be right there, wishing to be really rough.
Well, this is one interesting kind of green shoot that's come out of all of this for me. In the midst of the thousands, and I mean thousands of emails that I've had from my constituents about this, I've had some, I think around about 8 emails from young people between sort of, I'm 41. So I consider myself middle-aged now. So young, I'd say probably up to 30. I've had a good number of emails from people between the age of 17 and 30 going, Heidi, you're right, where do I sign up? What do I do? How do I get involved? So actually, our democracy is more alive than it has ever been. And it has made young people angry, and it has made young people want to get involved. I had my moment of clarity in 2011 when I saw the Tottenham riots, and I thought, this isn't my country. I've got to do something. And that moment is here now for young people, and I intend to grab them and involve them in the process. And I hope that's happening up and down the country. It certainly is here. I'm trying to pick people who haven't chosen so far. Gentleman here.
Thank you. On this question of Brexit means Brexit, I always thought that's an unhelpful comment because, as other speakers have said, we voted to leave the EU. What about the European Economic Area and staying in the single market? In business terms, it's leaving the single market, which is a big concern. I also think, echoing what other speakers have said, other questions have said, once Article 50 is triggered, you can't take it back. And we won't negotiate a free trade agreement within 2 years. And it's very unlikely you'll get all 27 member states to agree an extension. So what will happen on 1st January 2019, or whenever it is that we'll all wake up no longer in the EU, we'll be in the WTO, but that's all. We'll be preliminary negotiations will be underway for various free trade agreements, but they won't come to very much by then because these things we're told take 8 to 10 years. But there is a mechanism of the European Economic Area, and as a lawyer, when I explain to my clients, or to my firm, helping my firm explain to our clients, I should say, what it means, we say, well, if we stay in the EEA, in terms of sort of the areas of law that business people are concerned about, not very much will change because free movement will basically still apply. The EU competition rules will still apply under the EEA agreement, directly applicable. And a lot will not change. It's just that we'll be like, it's the so-called Norway model, although I don't actually like that term because EEA membership is what it is. And also you have a framework there with the EFTA and the EEA institutions and the agreement now. So what I'd like to know is, can the government see a way to seriously considering going to EEA membership? There are also, I believe, although I've not had time to research this yet, there are derogations on free movement of workers in the EEA agreement. So immigration is thought of as being a problem. There are some handles that you can hold on to try and find means of negotiation on that point. They're probably inserted into the agreement with the likes of Iceland and Liechtenstein in mind rather than the countries like the UK, but nonetheless the principle is there and there's a basis for negotiation if that sort of freedom, that area of freedom movement is a concern. And that way we can, I don't know what the position with grant funding will be, and I haven't looked into that, but in terms of the single market, which is a very important aspect, that's a means of salvaging an awful lot. So does Brexit mean joining the EEA, or does it mean leaving the EU and the EEA? Because it's a major question, it's not been properly addressed, and I would like to see some statement coming from Theresa May or from government as to where they stand on this.
And the first part of that was her appointing, within 12 hours, new cabinet posts to look at exactly this. Civil service departments are being shifted as we speak. People are moving. People are, we're pulling in trade experts. It's happening. You're not seeing it, of course, because you're not, we're not in the thick of it. But that is what's happening. But as I say, how long has she been down? 24, 36 hours. This will come. She was making ministerial appointments at 11 o'clock last night. So this woman is working as fast as there are hours in the day, but this stuff has to be gathered together, and I think it's far too early for us to panic and think that it's not going to work out. She needs to get a team in place, and she's doing that very, very swiftly. Lady there with the white top.
Hi. Different question a bit on the science. Do you know, or are you aware, what kind of consequences the Brexit can have on parishes? I'm one of the councillors in this area, and we do receive a lot of questions, as you probably receive yourself, what kind of consequences it's going to have on our parish. We struggle already, and with all the funds preset, how it's going to affect us, are we going to be having more responsibility? What Do you know what is going to happen to us as a parish?
I think absolutely nothing. Actually, the thing that will, if anything, change how things feel locally will be this devolution deal, which of course everybody started talking about now because the referendum has become the only thing people are talking about. But you know, it was one of the first questions I asked a couple of days after the referendum. I went to see Greg Clark, although of course he's changed jobs now, who was the Secretary of State for local government, to ask him, okay, our devolution deal that we're just on the cusp of agreeing here, is that still going to happen? And he said, absolutely, Heidi, it needs to happen faster than ever before now. Because this is about, you know, if there's money in the pipeline for projects within the Treasury forward plan, take it, it's there. So if anything, I think that will shape our future. But no, we shouldn't feel any more pushback at all as a consequence of this. Who else we have? I'm trying to look around, not so much over here. Gentleman with the glasses and black t-shirt.
Hi, so I've got a few points I'd like to make. I'd like to echo your sentiments that, you know, we have to make EU citizens feel welcome in this constituency. And one of my questions is about immigration policy. So one of the things that Theresa May did while she was Home Secretary was change the rules for non-EU citizens to say that they have to earn over £30,000 a year and have a doctorate or have a doctorate to come into this country. Now, the 11% of people in South Cams, how many of those would fit into those criteria? And I think we need to go back to the government and secure their position. And what I worry is that if we come out of the EU, what will happen is that policy will just be extended to include EU citizens as well. And I think our economy around here and communities and everything else will be the poorer for it. Yeah. On that point as well, I agree we have to stamp out this go home rhetoric. And Theresa May, she put that on her vans when she wanted even this go home. And I think she should apologise for that. What else? So, I declare an interest as well. I'm a scientist. Science funding is really important for me. What we haven't had is any commitment from the government to either ring-fence or protect science funding. And I think we really need that commitment now. In 2010, the Liberal Democrats were the only people that were standing up saying, we will ring-fence that. Went into coalition, we didn't get it. Now you have a majority, just about. You could do that, and you could make a lot of people feel a lot more secure, and especially in this area. Thank you.
So if I take those points in reverse order, so the science funding, yes, I think a number of people have asked that now, I want to push to get something in the autumn statement. I remember the pictures myself on the side of lorries, weren't they, go immigrants. And to be fair, not the most subtle campaign we've ever done. I suppose, I mean it's, yeah, it wouldn't be my choice of words, but I suppose what she was getting at was people who are here illegally, and you know, whether we're in or out the EU, an illegal immigrant is an illegal immigrant, full stop.
But it is one step away from the breaking point, those two, I think.
But yes, I think the wording was not what I would have chosen. Going back then to your very first point about this £30,000 threshold, I think actually what we'll find, and we had a real problem with this at Addenbrooke's a few months ago, where we had literally a plane load of nurses on a plane somewhere, ready to take off and come here from the Philippines. I can't remember where it was. It was like, no, don't let them take off. This 30,000 threshold's going, what? Ridiculous. So we got through that. It needs to be about skills. It shouldn't be about what you earn. It's about skills and what we need here. So I think everything we've had so far, it's got to be a blank piece of paper, start again. You know, because I don't want to drop into 25, because I know, well, an arbitrary figure, because some PhD people who are coming here aren't earning that kind of money. So it needs to be about skills and things that we need, as opposed to money being the only driver, because it does create some really artificial blips like that just aren't helpful. But I do think, you know, positive, this is an opportunity, I think, for us to completely look at, well, we have to, don't we, our whole immigration policy. Maybe with that's there.
Follow on from talking about immigration. I think it's, whether we like it or not, the Leave campaign ran with those hounds, talking about anti-immigration. And those monsters are amongst us, you know, they're here now. I think it's created a number of absurdities. The legal situation where we seem to have a fantasy that we can reduce immigration without damaging our trade. And I think we have to stand up and say that is a hard line for the EU. It is that we have to face that as we're going into the debates. I
think the other thing is the discussion of immigration in our country for a very long time has been toxic. The vans, the silly Labour mugs, it's been across all parties. And I think in Cambridge, in South Cambs, we know that immigration is positive. We have seen, you know, amongst our colleagues, our neighbours, our doctors, we know it is a positive thing for our society. And I think as a community, not only from our business interests, but as our position as a city, we need to make that argument that immigration can be a positive thing.
I think I mentioned briefly earlier, that's for me the irony of ironies, that the places in the UK that voted to stay in the EU were the places with the highest level of immigration. Go figure. Okay, you've asked a question. I'll chat with you. Lady here with the glasses.
Hi, I'd just like to make a point because I'm feeling frustrated because people keep on saying the population has voted as though they voted with one voice. I, in my own mind, have no doubt that for the people who voted to leave, there were a multitude of different reasons. Some did it on the immigration banner, some did it with this notion of sovereignty and control, some were taken in by the rhetoric of the Brexiteer campaign. Some did it as a fingers up, a two fingers to the elite politicians in this country because they felt disenfranchised and just wanted to do a protest vote, and subsequently said, oh, we didn't realise that this would be the effect. So this notion of the country has voted and they have voted with one voice to leave, when 48% of us, some of us over 65, actually voted to remain. One other point, which nobody would answer when I was asking the question before the vote, how much is it costing this country to actually now go through the process of dismantling our membership of the European Union? I'm sure it's probably costing nearly as much as the 350 million the Brexiteers were promising to the NHS. It beggars belief.
I suspect it'll be a lot more than 350 million.
I mean, honestly.
I know, and a few people have emailed us actually about that. And we keep asking the question, of course, until we've done it, we don't know. It's going to be one of those bills that you look at and think, oh, why did I spend that? I just don't look at the bill, because it'll just be depressing. But you're right. Gentleman here with the blue shirt.
I applaud your wish to for people to keep calm and not to get panic. I can quite understand that. That will get us nowhere. But I'm at the same time a little bit surprised that you're presenting the situation as if the whole picture is very clear and definite. I think probably the best thing that Theresa May has done so far is to make it clear that she's not going to press the button until after the end of this year. And I was a bit dismayed at the people she'd appointed, but then I thought actually it's not a bad thing, maybe, that she's got David Davis and Liam Fox to go out there and explore the situation. Now it seems to me highly possible that they may well come back before the end of this year and say, look, the cupboard is pretty bare. And are we not then going to be in a situation where Theresa May, trying to act in the best interests of the country, will be faced with trying to put forward something that she can't support either? And is that not going to be a situation where it's got to be open to Parliament and there's got to be the likelihood of a general election?
Or a referendum. Well, I suppose, if nothing else in the last few weeks, we've learned that anything is possible in politics. And you think you know the answers. I have to say, I think it's highly, highly unlikely, given that she will be sending out the most ardent Brexiters.
Exactly.
But so therefore, if anybody's going to get a deal, it could be them. I disagree. If you want a job doing, you have to send people that believe in it. You'll forgive me, I'm not going to take people shouting. But I suppose that the bottom line is, we can, if, what if, maybe, could it, would it, should it, we have to wait and see. We can exhaust and expend so much energy thinking, planning, failure, it's not going to work. We have to wait and see what they can do. To pontificate will just exhaust us.
Yeah, that's why it's not so definite.
We need to leave them to do the job. We only got appointed yesterday, so. Gentleman here, the blue t-shirt.
Yeah. So surely on that point, we don't know what the deal is going to be. When we know what the deal is, that has to go to a vote of the British people.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, it's easy to applaud and it's easy to say, yes, that's going to happen, but no, it doesn't. Why? Because if the government doesn't want to do something, and the majority of its population, whether there are 100 reasons behind that, have said they want to do something, government is not going to change.
People's views change.
People's views can change every day of the week, but you don't have a general election just because the wind changes. We can't.
Irreversible decision.
But don't forget that all of us, and I'm saying all this in the room, perhaps not all of us, but the majority of people in this room are very passionate in one direction. We are just people in a room. There are millions and millions and millions of people, 17 is it? No matter what 101 different views or reasons there might be, who voted to come out. That is the expressed wish of the British people. We have to accept that. Let me take, I don't think you asked me a question, have a gentleman there, glasses.
I also confess being over 65. Just this point that's been raised, if in fact the Brexiters have been sent out to get the best deal, then if they don't come back with what they promised they could achieve, that would surely be something which would be quite serious. The people who voted to come out didn't get what they wanted. So can Article 50 actually be terminated once it's in action?
In other words, once the button is pressed, no?
Yes, once you can't stop it.
No, although the only thing I would, and I'm going to have the advice I just gave you now, I suppose the only part of me that thinks, in strict legal terms, no it can't, but given that I do think we have opened a bit of the European Pandora's box, I do wonder how Europe might evolve. I do wonder what kind of new deals might come. I do wonder what kind of new relationship might happen. And, it could be messy, but, there are, there have to be processes in place. We can't make the rules as we go along. And as it stands, Article 50, once that's pressed, that's pressed. But I think there is every opportunity to get a better deal once it's done. I really do. We have to be positive for that.
I would also say that if you don't get access to the free market, anybody who ships stuff around the world will know that if you have to start filling in transit forms, that is going to be red tape like you've not seen before. You've got customs ivory checking it, stuff that is shipped from Europe to the UK to assemble, to go out, has got a double tariff adding. There are thousands of people involved living around here. Airbus wings in Bristol, automotive industry bringing parts in out. It's an absolute disaster.
It's huge. Absolutely. Our business, we ship all over the world, and we find Norway and Switzerland almost impossible to do business with because of all those reasons, exactly that. But this is where I think this brave new world and Europe could evolve. If they want to keep us, because don't forget, they need our business as much as we need them. It is not in their interest to cut their nose off to spite their faces. I think if we try to negotiate too quickly while the wounds are very raw, I think we might get some very, very kind of emotive responses. But I think if we let it settle, they do not want to stop trading with us. They really don't. Gentleman with the blue shirt and glasses.
Thank you. You keep talking about mandates and majorities, but of the total UK electorate, 37% have voted for Brexit, 35% have voted to stay, and 28% have elected not to vote. That's not a majority, that's a triage. And if Parliament tries to force legislation through against the wishes of perhaps 2/3 or more of the UK population, you're going to be in trouble.
Commitment, either in numbers or passion, or what period of time do you want from the constituents of South Cambridgeshire before you're prepared to stand up in Parliament and put your vote in our favour, to vote against the whip? If we can get you, we need another 11, and then we really can change the world.
Yes, thank you.
But I bring you back to the point that there is nothing that we will vote on that can change Article 50. It would take a separate Act of Parliament to change us accepting Article 50. And who do you think is going to put forward another Act of Parliament? The government. And the government doesn't want to do this.
Why is Anna Soubry speaking out against it?
Sorry, was that why?
And Sue has said she is still going to go on campaigning.
And some will do on a popular basis. I'll get much more applause and cheers if I say I'm going to do that, but I have to be realistic about what we can achieve. And I bring you back, do you want me as a thorn in the side of government, or do you want me to go not fighting for our research community? It is not possible. It's not possible. And again, I take it back, even if we're trying to push through a second act of Parliament, if people are defending the position of their majority constituents in their constituencies, we will arrive at the same place. Because more constituencies voted to come out than stay in. So that argument falls apart, I'm afraid. Lady there with the glasses.
I'm a scientist, an early career scientist, and I've got a lot of concerns as those in this room. But what I want to know from you is what can I do to help make sensible decisions up and down? You know, how can we articulate ourselves to government in a way that silly decisions don't get made in the future?
Thank you. and I am getting people starting to email with offering of help. Thank you. What I need is all the things in your world, whether it's agricultural, scientific research, academic, whatever it might be, what are the things that worry you that you need to come out of the negotiations? What are the things that you need to continue functioning at the top of your game? Give me a list, and that's the list we go in and negotiate on. Gentleman here.
I'm Keith Turner from Melbourne. One point about science and one point about democracy. So the scientific point, obviously Cambridge is a world leader in the UK's right at the top of science. And I'm not aware of, I think, any view that sees anything positive that will come out of this. So I guess we're into trying to limit the damage that our government causes to Cambridge and our science. And there's a lot of talk about, can we access the funding? Do we need excellent people to come from around the world and be part of the teams? And obviously that's clear. I think I can see you're clear about what that is. There's one other point that doesn't get mentioned so often, and I'm worried about it being undervalued, and that is the value of our influence on making these decisions. And I think it's not just a scientific point, I think it's true across the board, actually. And obviously by walking out, we will lose influence on really all these things that are being decided. So I would like to ask you if you would remember the value of that aspect of the negotiations and try to make sure that it doesn't get lost without being considered a valuable loss. And then the second point, which is about on the democracy side, so you've spoken rightly, it's fairly clear what the referendum says, but it's made me think a bit about how our democracy works and how we make decisions, because it's much wider than one vote, of course. And the situation, the way we work, we're led to a situation where we've got clearly a very big and risky change. It's been agreed by 2% more than half. It does not have a sustained view over time yet. In fact, the contrary is true if you look at polls. It's not stood the test of time. We've got a situation where 2 of the 4 nations disagree with it. One wants to become independent and break up the country. The other has a history of violence related to the existence of a border. We've got young people overwhelmingly against it. They will become, assuming that sort of view that they have of the modern world, if that comes with them in the coming years, they will become more of the electorate. And in fact, the turnover of the electorate is a couple of % per year. So by the time the 2 years is gone, it could easily be an argument in the opposite direction as it is in favour now. And I would certainly question whether that, in the round, is our democracy working to represent broadly what people want. And so this is, you've said a couple of times about trying to see things positive and what good can come from it, especially when such a big change is happening. Perhaps that's something that can precipitate change. And I would like to see changes in democracy, actually, and in our ability to make sensible decisions. And I've got 2 things that to me are quite important. One is improving the degree of honesty with which politicians speak and offer things. It's been awful. I mean, the last election, general election, was bad, and for many years. And obviously this referendum has really hit all-time lows. And I feel some sort of system needs to come in whereby somehow facts and statistics and things come from some sort of independent authority, and the politicians interpret that in a way that shows what the impact could be. The other thing that I would like to see from improving democracy, it would be great if it could come out of this, and it's the one thing that might actually help to unify my view on this whole debacle, is the way our parliament is elected. We have a system at the moment where seats in parliament bear almost no relation to votes cast by people. And there is obviously some, with all the parties, we've got the right wingers and the left wingers, and not much, some sort of split centre and so on, and the Liberals are weak at the moment. There obviously is some potential that, say, a central party could emerge. It might have a really major following, and it could well be that an election was called and our electoral system probably wouldn't actually award many seats to that party. And that, to me, is another thing that is just fundamentally lacking, and there's been a contribution in causing this, because the whole referendum's come from basically a party political manoeuvre to call it in the first place. So my second question to you is, would you be prepared in trying to seek for those really good positive things that might come from this, maybe a proper overhaul and update of our democracy and democratic system might be something that we could achieve, that would be something to be worth lasting from the end?
Absolutely. Finishing with your last point, I absolutely would promote anything that improves the democracy. I mean, don't forget, in 2011, I had never in my life thought I would get involved in politics. And guess what? If you want to change it, you need to get off your sofa and do it. And that's what I have done.
Absolutely.
So I didn't sit at home moaning anymore. I decided to get in there and change it, because I didn't feel that the government, that Parliament was representing people like me. But we all have a role in that, whether it's on a parish council, district council, county council. Come and talk to me about it if you want to be an MP, I'll show you how to do it. The only way we change the system is by getting in there ourselves. And that's what I'm doing, so I will certainly continue to try and change that. On politicians speaking the truth, it's an interesting point. Somebody raised this at the Camborne meeting a fortnight ago. I think, given that we love free speech in this country, it's one of the best things we have, you're never going to be able to legislate for what comes out of somebody's mouth. I just don't think that's possible. But when it comes to printed material, whether it's leaflets or the side of double-decker buses, yes, I do wonder if there's something in that, actually. That anything in that's printed, it's a bit like an advert, isn't it? Yeah. The same with the Advertising Standards Agency, there should be something, and I do think that is worth exploring, certainly. But yeah, if you legislate for what came out of his mouth, Boris would never speak again. So, actually, you're right. And one of the first things you started with is, should we never forget our power, our influencing power, and that's absolutely right. We still have the brains here. It's not just about funding, we still have the brains here, and brains want to deal with brains. And brains will always be attracted to brains, it's not just about your funding deal. And I think we have such a powerful role. Now, I want to turn it with Sadiq Khan as the Mayor of London. We need to work as a team, and we should be the central ones influencing how we move forward, because we are so valuable. We must never forget what we have here, it's magical. The European Union will still want a part of that, but it's like influence is the most important thing, it really is. Who hasn't? You've had a question. Gentleman there in the boat jacket, you've been very patient. I was coming to you deliberately last because I knew you were in Campen a fortnight ago, so I was looking for new faces first. Come on.
So, just a word about the policy of the Brexiteers, and particularly the three now that are in government. So, Boris Johnson we've already mentioned, and that's probably enough said. Unbelievable. But there we go. I'm quite interested about what the tactics for that are, but never mind, we'll come back to that. Liam Fox, I believe, had to resign because of inappropriate behaviour when he was the Defence Secretary. Is that right?
I don't know, actually.
I think so. Probably. He took somebody abroad with him that he shouldn't have. And David Davis, it was a long time ago, it was 2 days before he was appointed, wrote an article about how he thought we should negotiate our terms for exiting and afterwards. And there seems to me to be a terrible naivety in government about the legislation and the law behind this. Because for 2 years, after we invoke Article 50, we are not allowed to negotiate outside of the EU because we're members of the EU until we have left. And one of the principal issues of negotiating as part of the EU, why we've only got 27 negotiators and China have got 900, is that we're not allowed to negotiate trade deals. So we can't do anything until we've left. So David Davis is naive in the extreme when he thinks we can just go back to a WTO agreement and then think that the EU is going to magically wave its wand and give us the best deal possible. And it's just naivety in the extreme, and I'm really depressed about it, and even a depression on top of the depression from 24th of June.
Well, if it shows you, let's start with the June. I'm sure we've all heard it already, that Theresa May didn't really want to promote Boris. She put F off next to his name, and that got read as horrible. A good one, and then you find out he's been sexting his assistant or whatever. So, but you know, that's why we need more normal people. They only change when we boot them out or we put normal people in there. You know, I can't fix it all, but we need to get in there and change it. But let's start by legislating what they've been to this. On this idea of negotiation within the 2-year period, that can't be right, or at least put it this way. Given, and Nancy, perhaps you can jot this down as something to do some more research on. Because David Davis, Liam, the whole team, they're already boarding planes and trying to get deals sort of waiting on the wings. I don't think there's anything to stop us doing that.
On a technical note, it's an international treaty, so if we negotiated while we're still members of the EU, we'd be breaking international law. So we'd have a government minister, in the case of either three of them, trying to negotiate with countries outside, and they'd be breaking the law in doing so.
See, that doesn't seem right to me, because when we've been doing deals with China in recent time, anyway, can we go away and do some research on that? Do you know anything about that, Antony? No.
Yeah, we can still go out and talk to them once Article 50 has been triggered. At that point, we can start going out.
So once Article 50 is triggered, we can start going out and negotiating. Okay. Well, we'll get some more clarification on that and put it on the website, but you're right, it would be absolutely lunatic if we weren't able to do that. Gentleman right at the back.
I mean, it was mentioned before, and I would echo it, maybe we can drop using Brexit in the Brexit, because it's fairly vacuous. What Brexit means will become apparent as negotiations begin and progress. You say informal negotiations probably are beginning right now and over the summer. I guess my concern is how those negotiations will be scrutinised by Parliament, by the public. What level of disclosure of those discussions will there be, or will there be something just plonked on MPs to debate in Parliament and vote on? And it won't have had the level of scrutiny that's required. I think we've seen a lot of anger in terms of European negotiations with the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, with the TTIP negotiations across Europe, because there's not been enough scrutiny, transparency in the negotiations, and we're not having a chance to comment on what we're getting. If leaving the EU is agreed upon, and that's your position, we need very good scrutiny of actually what that means.
Agreed. And I have read somewhere in the last couple of days, I'm not sure where I read it, but we have select committees that scrutinise various areas of government, so I sit on the work and pensions one, for example. I have heard that the whole scrutiny system needs re-looking at now, because essentially driven by, Teresa's been chopping and changing and moving departments, so it is my understanding that there will be a new level of scrutiny brought in just for this. But certainly as the situation evolves, we can provide feedback on that. But that's my understanding that will change. It has to, absolutely has to, and also through Parliament as well in the normal way. Lady there at the back.
Yes, so you've got some interesting work about which is feedback.
Now, I come from Yorkshire as well. Most of my family members didn't vote because they felt like they didn't want to make a massive decision that was going to affect their grandchildren and their children's lives. And they thought that it would be like hitting a nuclear button and everything was just going to implode. So we're in a position now where we voted to kind of go out, but we really don't know what that looks like. There are going to be committees kind of trying to negotiate across multiple different sectors of business to try and determine what that looks like. Before we actually hit the button on Article 50/50, what is the likelihood that we can have a sense check across normal citizens to see how they feel that looks with regards to the way that they kind of voted in order to bring around the referendum in the first place? Because I know from my family members alone, they feel completely out of control, that they don't have, they had a say to the votes and they didn't know which way to go, so they either did based on randomness or they just didn't because they didn't want to have that responsibility. But now that we're in this decision where we are going to go out, as citizens, how do we get to see what that looks like and actually give you feedback on how we feel that is going to affect us going forward?
Well, I suppose on a local level, my responsibility will be to you as, the scrutiny goes on. If there are aspects of the negotiation that don't look right in terms of, no, well, that's not going to help me in the research industry or my farming budget isn't going to match it, that's the feedback that you need to give me. So as it evolves, I'll make sure it's on the website and anybody, I hope you will feel that you can approach me. I'm perfectly, I don't hide away. You can come and talk to me, email me, write to me at all times, tweet me. And give me feedback on a constant basis, because this stuff I'm sure will go through Parliament. Oh, I'm getting closer, I am. And note to self, if there are new scrutiny committees, let's see whether I can get on one. Actually, I would imagine there'll be a massive scrabble actually, but given that our voice for Cambridgeshire and science should be hugely powerful, if anybody should have a seat on that, then it should be me. So there we go, let's try and promote myself. I have to tell you, working pension, nobody wants to go on that, I did. Now I know why. So that would be kind of on an ongoing basis, but in terms of, right, we've done it all, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do you want it or don't you? I think not, because that then is, how do you sense check? Well, it's a referendum, isn't it? Yes, I suspect not. Given the current mood at the moment, I suspect not.
Putting a poll out on the internet, with a kind of how do you feel on this, kind of yes, no, without having an actual outcome from it, just to have a sense as to how the country feels on it. Bearing in mind that a lot of people that kind of have voted out, and I know I've spoken to my family members, feel that they were misled and that they were told things were going to happen that didn't. And let's face it, nobody's made any decisions about what this is going to look like. The committees are only being put in place now, and it's not until we get to the stage where we think, right, yes, we're ready now, we're going to hit that, but where we can actually sit down and say, is this sensible? And as citizens, how do we see that? How do we feed back on that? And like you say, can we have a sense check without having a referendum? I don't know.
No, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't see any other way. And I would love us, just as an aside, to get to a point where we can vote electronically. I'd love to vote electronically in the House of Commons, but guess what? The whips don't want you to do that because they don't get to hassle you through an iPad. So they like to do it in But how do you run a poll? How do you know it's secure? How do you know the right person is a citizen is clicking the box? The technical stuff wrapped around that. I think as a way forward for our democracy in general, I think it's a great idea, but I don't see it coming in time for this, unfortunately. Okay, this gentleman with the checkered shirt here, I don't think you've asked a question.
It's one of the sound bites that clearly resonated with a lot of the population was, we don't want unelected bureaucrats in the European Commission making our laws for us. Now, I guess most people in this room probably know that that's not how it works. The European Commission can only make proposals, and that those get acted upon and agreed between the Parliament, European Parliament and the European Council. What is probably less well known is that before any proposal hits the light of day, there's a lot of work done in expert committees across a whole sector of industry. I spent 6 years in Brussels for a sector of the automotive industry, attending lots of these meetings. They're attended by experts from the member states, civil servants, groups from industry, consumer groups, a whole cross-section. And we need to continue to have a seat at that level, because I think it's more important to have an input at the grassroots level of directives. And I think it would be possible, if we were in the single market in some way, that we could still retain a seat at these committees, and that may be something that should be worked upon.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent idea. So for me, it's what we should be aiming for, certainly. Okay, I'm going to take two last questions. So if you've had your hand up before, sorry. This gentleman at the back, the short sleeve shirt. Oh, in fact, both of you. You can fight it out between you guys first.
I just wanted to follow up from what the gentleman who has now left us with the green shirt started on. That is the number of people who voted for Brexit compared to the number of people who didn't. This room will be full of people who have a certain view of what it is to be a European, and I'm proud to be a European. But it does seem that the people who voted for Brexit have a different view of what it is to be a European. Some of which, well, anyway, we'll leave that. But very many millions of them thought that they were going to get £350 million a week for the NHS. Very many millions of them thought we were going to reduce immigration to the tens of thousands. Many millions of them thought that the thought of unelected bureaucrats is awful and should all be elected. Now, for whatever reason, they are not going to get that, whatever our renegotiation ends with. How are these people to be understand that that is not what they're going to get? What they voted for is not what they're going to get. And the gentleman in the green shirt was quite clear about the numbers here. We can expect that a proportion of them would be natural UKIP, but a huge majority of them are not natural UKIP, they're natural something else. How is that something else going to manifest itself? Because it could be very nasty.
If I start on your second point, I think that this is one of the biggest things that sort of occurs to me, that the nastiness that has been unleashed, and we've seen little bits of it, fortunately more on the news than in our own areas, but that nastiness, that brush is tarring all the Leave voters, and that's not fair. That's not fair, because the majority of those people just had a different view, just had a different vision, just had a different hope. So I don't think we need to assume that we've unleashed hell, because it's been an excuse for some people to unleash hell, but that is not the majority. 99.999% of vote leavers are voted to vote Remainers. But unfortunately, the nastiness, the Daily Mail headlines, the tar everybody with the same brush. But it goes back to my point earlier about why, for me, Theresa was the only Prime Minister that could possibly had a hope of pulling people back together. And I think that's why her opening speech was so important, that she used those words about, if you're struggling, I'm talking to you. I found that so powerful. So she's on the money. She understands that, I think, far better, and certainly doesn't want to trumpet remaining or Brexiting. This is about people, and that's very strong coming across from her. The other thing you started with was how do we communicate to those that had this belief that they were going to get 350 million for the NHS every week, and how do we tell them that that's not the case? Well,
Boris is in cabinet.
I think that wasn't what swung it for all the vote leavers. I would imagine the majority of vote leavers had a view about sovereignty and all the other things. Those that really believed it was all about getting £350 million a week from the NHS, I suspect, possibly aren't that engaged in politics on a regular basis anyway, to believe something like that. I think there's more to it. I do.
That questions democracy's very nature, doesn't it?
Excuse me, I'll just finish my point with gentlemen. So, going back to the first point about Theresa May, that's why it's so important to have somebody that changes the dialogue, changes the rhetoric around politics, that we talk honestly, directly to people who feel disenfranchised. And we just have to reset and start again, and start having a different language and a more honest language with people. Because politicians have got away with it for far too long. And this should be our wake-up call, no longer.
But if it was an insurance policy, Heidi, they'd have 15 days to change their mind. We haven't read the policy yet.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're kind of going round in circles. I'm hoping this last gentleman here is going to say something nice. Make that.
Yeah. I have two kids at university. They're both graduating in the next year or so. They feel betrayed. They've been encouraged to take on huge amounts of student debt, and now the rug's being pulled from their feet as they see it. Both of them are looking at opportunities in countries like Germany, which has got a chronic shortage of scientists and engineers. How can we encourage them that the future is brighter? I'm sure you appreciate that if all our young educated people leave, I think the cliche is we'll look like Greece without the sunshine. So how do we do this?
Not with the user either.
Not the beaches either.
We all have a role to play in that. I'm trying to do my part. I mentioned earlier these emails I'm getting from young people who want to get involved. I am grabbing them and I'm bringing them. You know, only last week I met a young lady who came to visit me in Westminster about, how do I become an MP? Can you help me? Where do I start? We grab that energy. I'm visiting as many schools as I can. Your idea you gave me today that I should have a meeting for people in sixth forms. That there is a positive here. These are the green shoots. People are angry, but when you're angry, you do something. And that's what I did when I saw the top and rights on the TV. So we have to grasp that and use it and turn it to our advantage. People, I think, democracy is more alive than it has ever been. And it's our responsibility to turn that into something positive. And I, for my part, am certainly going to do my best to try and do that. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to let Duxford have their room back. Thank you very, very much to everybody for coming out. Anybody who hasn't had their question answered, either for the form at the front here, or you know how to find me, email me, tweet me, give me a call. And as this situation is obviously going to evolve in the weeks that go forward, do keep in touch with me, and you will always get honesty from me. I'll give you all the information I have as soon as I do have it. So thank you and enjoy your weekend.